Now, before we actually start to look at outputting these to the page and allowing users to click on them, we want to create some test content. Now, I've already done this, but go ahead and basically just create whatever you want in here. You can see that inside of here, I have quite a bit of content. It's very unreadable within this interface, but basically I have 3 different articles. One is in draft mode. Remember, when we created our migrations, we created a draft column. This basically allows us not to show it on the home page, but allows us to view it ourselves with the slug that we provide in the URL. And that just means that we can preview it when we're writing it. So let's focus on outputting these to the front page, and then we'll make them click through to our actual article. So inside of our controllers, inside of home controller, this is where we're going to be pulling in our posts, but we need an eloquent model before we do this. Besides the default user model, we're going to create a new model here, and we're going to call this post.php. And it's important with the naming conventions, unless you want to specify the table name yourself. In this case, post is a singular of posts, which is what we called our database table. If I'd called this some posts.php, it wouldn't work. We'd have to specify the table ourselves. But because Eloquent does take plural into consideration, all I need to do here is define a class called post, obviously extend Eloquent, and I can just create some brackets and not do much else. So we now have the rich functionality that Eloquent provides, and we can actually pull in all our posts. So let's do a little bit of testing here. Let's create a post variable here. Now I'm going to say post get. So let's do a print r on post, and let's see what we get. And there we go, we've got a load of content. You can see that I've got some Cupcake Ipsum content in here that just basically represents some body text. So now that we've got this, we need to take into consideration the fact that we don't want draft articles to show on the home page. So I'm going to create a where clause here, and I'm going to say where draft is 0. So we get all articles where the draft on the article is 0, and then we can pass this through to our view. So I'm going to say with posts. So that's now available within our home view here. So what we can do is we can do a quick if statement here, and we can end that there, and we can say if posts count, and in here we can do a for each posts as post. We can end that for each, and we can place the markup that we created earlier inside of here and just indent that properly there. So we know the column names for each of the elements, so let's output post title, and in here let's output post body. And for read more, we'll leave that as it is. Now we now see, undefined variable post, so let's check this. There we go, so let's get rid of that. And there we go. So we've now got the content as we'd expect it, but there's one more thing that we need to bear in mind. I did say that we were going to use this package, which is basically a pass down wrapper. Pass down is a markdown parser for PHP. So let's take this here that we need to require into our composer file, and let's scroll down and hit our composer.json file, and in require, let's add this in. So let's head over to the terminal here, and we'll do a composer update. Okay, so now that them dependencies are installed, we can basically just follow the instructions in here. So in config app, we need to add one of the service providers, or the service provider for this. So let's copy this. Let's head over to app. And down here, we have our list of service providers. So we can just add this down there. We also need to add an alias as well. So let's go ahead and copy this. And we'll paste this here. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can use this to parse any markdown we want. So we can just use markdown, then the static method parse, and then enter our content. So in this case, what we actually don't need to do is need to include our paragraph as we have here. So I can just get rid of this, and I can say markdown parse post body. And there we go. So it's automatically generated that for me. Now we want to limit this because we don't actually want this to be as long as it is. We want these to be previews. So before we pass the markdown, let's use the string helper and let's limit this. So let's limit the post body, and we'll limit that to say 100 characters. And there we go. Or we can make that a little bit longer actually. There we are. So we've now got a preview of the article. We are parsing the markdown. We now need to allow the user to click on either the title. So let's wrap this in an anchor. And we also want them to allow to click read more. But we don't have a route set up to actually show the posts here. So we need to go ahead and do that now. So under routes, let's create a route called posts, and then we want to be able to pass in a slug. We have not a callback, an array here. We want to say this as post show. You can call this whatever makes sense, especially as your app grows larger. And in here, we're going to say post controller at get show. So now we can create the post controller and we can create the get show method. This probably could be get index actually. It depends on how precise you want to be about your naming. But let's create this post controller now. So we have a post controller, and that extends our base controller. So inside of here, we now have this get show method, and this takes a slug. So we can test this out by actually just echoing or returning the slug. Let's save this as post controller, and there we are. So what we now need to do is we need to actually define our links to link through to post show passing in the slug. So let's get rid of these, and inside let's get rid of this and this and this we don't need. So in here let's use the URL helper to basically link through to post show, then we pass in the slug, and that's it. So let's just copy and paste this down to here, and that's it. So now what's going to happen is, of course, so let's just go and say post slug, post slug. So that's coming from the post. So now we've got these links. Now if I click on this, you can see that it goes through to, in fact, the slug, and then it echoes out the slug. The same with this one, installing Laravel, it works the same way. So now that we've got the linking through nailed, let's actually create the view for actually viewing this specific post. So let's create a new folder in here, and let's call this posts. And in here, let's create a new file, and we will call this show.blade.php, and we'll just call this show for now. So under the post controller, rather than echoing out the slug, the first thing that we want to do is actually get the post by the slug. So let's create a new variable called post. We'll say post, so our post model, and we'll say where slug is equal to the slug that we've just passed in, and we're going to say first or fail. So if it can't find that, it will just fail, and you can set up custom 404s and stuff like that. Now what we want to do is return the creation of our view, which is posts.show as we've just created, and we want to pass through the post to that view. So now what we can do is, if we close off home, inside of show, let's actually just do a print R on post. So when I click this, we get all the content of that post. When I click this, we get all the content of that post. Now I also, inside of my database table, have a draft article, if you remember. And I've called this not quite finished. So the slug is not quite finished, and there we go. So we've got this here as well. So we can preview our articles in this way. Let's actually create the design, if you like, for this. So remember, we're extending the default template, so templates.default, and the content in here, so section content, we stop that there, is going to be the actual post. So all we want to really do here is from our home view, copy this, paste that in there, sort out the indentation, and now what we can do is remove the limited string, get rid of this view read more link, and then we could optionally get rid of this anchor, but we can leave it there really, it doesn't really matter. So when I refresh, we've now got the actual post here and the content. So if we go back, there we go, and if we go back, there we go. So we've now got all of this content in here. It works, we can click through to our blog articles, but what we now want to do is just customize the header, because at the moment every single article has the same title, which is a little bit annoying, and really it's very, very bad practice. So what we're going to do is inside of our default template, we're going to introduce, or rather inside of the header, we're going to introduce the yielding of a title. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say yield title. So on the home page for the title, we're just going to call this home. So if we head over to here now, we need a little space in there. That now says home pipe blog. Now when I click through to one of these, I want the just before the pipe to be the name of the article title or the blog title. So let's now go into show, and we can say section title and stop, and in here we can say post title. So now when we refresh, we get the post title inside of the header. Now the last thing that we're going to do is look at actually outputting the date, the creation date. Obviously this is optional, but it's probably highly recommended for you to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the home page, and just down here I'm going to create a paragraph, and I'm going to say published on, and then I'm going to give a date here. So now on the home page we've got published on, and we want to output the date. Now in Laravel, the created at date and the updated at date, which I mentioned earlier when we were creating our migrations, returns a carbon object, and carbon is a date handler in PHP, and a very popular and very, very powerful one. So what we can actually do here is, rather than use native PHP functions, this is abstracted for us to the point where it just works really, really well. So what we can do is we can actually say something like post created at, and let's just take a look at that as it is. You can see that it just looks like that. But what we can do is we can use things like formats. We can use the format method, and we can provide in here a date or time format that you would normally see in PHP, and that will then generate the relevant date in the relevant format for you. What you could also do is you could use the diff for humans method, which is quite popular, and this will show you when this was created. So my database and times are a bit messed up, but this would say something like 2 days ago or 1 week ago or 2 years ago or whatever. For now though, I'm going to keep this in this format. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste actually all of this, and let's put this inside of show. Now ideally what you'd do is you would store this format on a model somewhere, or somewhere in your app settings, just so you don't need to keep repeating it over and over again. So we've now got published on Monday the 9th of June 2014. When we click through to this, we get the same thing. So with very, very little effort and very little code, we've created a powerful blog, because we're using Markdown and Parse Down to parse it. and we can click through. We've got titles, we've got dates, and that's it really. Fairly easy to create a Laravel blog.